My name is Daria Miller. I'm 35 years old. And 10 years ago, my sister didn't just steal the man I was supposed to marry, she stole the version of my life everyone thought I would live. Tonight, in a single room filled with 40 relatives, every lie she ever built was about to collapse, and the man walking toward that collapse was my husband she never knew existed. If stories about family betrayal, quiet resilience, and karma arriving at the perfect moment resonate with you, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing these stories travel farther than the people who once tried to bury me. Now, let me take you back to the night everything came full circle. The Rosewood Room in downtown Seattle had been my mother's choice. Crystal chandeliers, velvet seating, white porcelain plates arranged so precisely it felt like a wedding dinner. Nearly 40 members of the Miller family filled the long table, each dressed as if this dinner were some kind of royal gathering rather than what it truly was, a stage for my sister, Sophia Miller Hayes, to perform. I had chosen the seat near the end, half sheltered by an oversized flower arrangement. Not to hide, just to breathe. Being back in the same room as the woman who once dismantled my life required more oxygen than usual. My phone buzzed beneath the tablecloth. ETA, 45 minutes. Are you sure you want to do this? A small smile touched my lips. I typed back, trust me. Then I slipped my wedding ring. Small, platinum, its inscription pressed against my palm, into my purse. Not yet. No reveals until timing could cut clean. At exactly 7:15, the double doors opened as if pushed by a gust of self-importance. Sophia walked in first, her designer gown shimmering under the chandelier like she'd stepped out of a magazine cover. Behind her was Richard Hayes, my former fiancé, now her husband, wearing a navy suit tailored well enough to hide the panic that had been clinging to him for months. "Daria," Sophia sang out, her voice pitched high enough for the entire room to hear. "Oh my goodness, you actually came. I wasn't sure." Every fork lowered. Every eye turned. The family telegraph had been working overtime for a decade, and everyone knew the simplified version of the story. Poor Daria left behind, lucky Sophia swept away by love. Richard glanced at me for half a second before looking down at the tablecloth. He still couldn't meet my eyes. Not after the way he left me, not after what he built his life on. His hair had thinned, his posture sagged. Stress clung to him like a second suit. "Of course I came," I answered calmly. "Family is family." Sophia's smile sharpened. It always did when she sensed an audience. She floated around the table, kissing cheeks, stretching her hand so the 3-carat diamond caught every bit of light. She'd chosen her seat directly across from me. Of course she had. Perfect lighting, perfect positioning for the show she was about to put on. My mother tried to keep the atmosphere warm, talking about a cousin's new baby, someone's retirement, little stories meant to tether us. But Sophia's restless energy kept slicing through every gentle moment like a blade. My phone buzzed again. In position. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. The timing was unfolding exactly as planned. "So, Daria," Sophia's voice rose over my mother's sentence. "Why don't you tell everyone what you've been doing lately? You're still at that, what was it? Data entry job?" "Strategic consulting," I corrected quietly. Right. She waved a careless hand, letting her ring flash like a weapon. "And still living in that tiny studio downtown, aren't you? I worry about you." A soft laugh rippled through the relatives. Not loud, just enough to sting. I lived in a penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay, but that didn't belong to this conversation yet. "I'm comfortable," I said. "Comfortable." She repeated the word like it tasted sour. "Well, I suppose that's something. And dating anyone special?" She tilted her head with mock sympathy, preparing the line she'd clearly rehearsed. The room quieted. Even the servers paused. "Oh, honey," she sighed dramatically. "Still single at 35? You need to be realistic. The good ones are all taken." Her fingers curled possessively around Richard's arm. He shifted uncomfortably. Aunt Valerie tried to interject, but Sophia steamrolled right over her. "Some women just aren't meant to keep a man's interest long-term, and that's okay. No shame in that." My phone buzzed once more. Almost time. I kept my expression calm, even as 40 eyes watched Sophia sharpen her cruelty into a polished monologue. "Remember when we were kids?" she continued, laughing. "Daria always said she'd be the first to get married. She had a whole scrapbook. Look how life shuffles the deck." Her laughter tinged the whole table. I slid my hand into my purse, brushing the cool metal of my ring. "Not yet." "That's kind of you to worry," I said softly. She thought she was winning. She truly believed humiliation still worked on me the way it did 10 years ago. She didn't know I'd spent the last decade building something stronger than the version of myself she destroyed. She didn't know the man she mocked, the man she assumed I didn't have, was the same one stepping out of a black car outside the Rosewood room, holding documents that would erase the foundation of her perfect, stolen life. And she definitely didn't know that in less than an hour, she would lose everything she used to measure her value. Sophia leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table the way she always did when she wanted to command the room. "You know, Daria," she continued, voice dipped in honey but sharp enough to cut, "I've been thinking, maybe we should help you set up some online dating profiles. There are still a few decent men left if you don't mind lowering your standards a little." A few relatives shifted in their seats. Others stayed painfully still. Humiliation wasn't new to me. Not from her. But the way she layered it, mixing pity and superiority, was almost an art form. She swiped open her phone, scrolling through photos she'd clearly prepared. "Look," she said brightly, "this is Richard's colleague. He just got divorced. Ordinary job, nothing glamorous. But he could be a good fit for you. Men like women who don't demand too much." I didn't bother glancing at the screen. "And this one," she continued, turning the phone again, "my trainer's brother. 3 kids. Some issues with drinking, but he's working through them. You should keep your options open." A forced laugh trembled through the room. My mother looked horrified. My father looked exhausted. Richard looked like he wished he could dissolve into the tablecloth. Sophia tossed her hair, pretending she didn't notice the discomfort she caused. "Men are so visual, you know. Maybe try a softer wardrobe next time. Something more flattering. And have you thought about losing 5 or 10 pounds? Cameras can be so unforgiving." I inhaled slowly through my nose, letting the air steady me. A younger version of me, the one she broke a decade ago, would have folded under this kind of scrutiny. But the woman sitting here now knew she wasn't trapped in the story Sophia kept trying to write. Sophia flashed a sympathetic smile. "Oh, sweetie, don't look at me like that. I'm just being honest. We're sisters. Who else will tell you the truth?" My phone buzzed under the tablecloth. "In position." 3 syllables that felt like the first crack of thunder above a long, dry field. I didn't look at the message. I didn't need to. He was outside. Waiting. Ready. Sophia reached for her wine glass, the diamond bracelet on her wrist catching the light dramatically. "You know, it's funny," she said, turning toward her husband. "Richard and I were just talking about Santorini, the anniversary trip next week. 10 years married. Can you believe it?" Her eyes locked onto mine as she spoke. A deliberate cruelty. An echo of a wound she had carved and polished for a decade. Richard's hand trembled slightly on his napkin. I saw it. Sophia didn't. "You remember Santorini, don't you, Daria?" she went on softly. "Didn't you once say that's where you wanted your honeymoon to be? Or am I misremembering?" A ripple of tension struck the table like static. My pulse held steady. My voice, when I answered, was calm enough to feel like defiance. "You're not misremembering." She smiled triumphantly, as if she'd landed a decisive blow. But she didn't know she'd just underlined the final chapter of her own storyline. Aunt Valerie cleared her throat. "Sophia, that's enough." "Oh, please, I'm helping," she said, tone feather light. "Not everyone gets the fairy tale. Someone has to be realistic." I let her talk. Let her paint herself into a corner so tightly there would be no graceful exit when the truth arrived. My phone lit again, this time with an incoming call. His name flashed across my screen. I declined it, but the corner of my mouth lifted. "Expecting someone?" Sophia asked, narrowing her eyes. "Yes," I said simply. Her excitement spiked like a predator catching scent. "Oh my God, did you actually bring a date? Daria, why didn't you say something? Is he shy? Is he parking?" She leaned forward eagerly. "Wait, can he not afford valet?" Even Richard flinched at that. I placed my napkin down with deliberate care. "I'll be right back." The shift in the room was subtle but palpable. 40 pairs of eyes followed me as I stood. Sophia's curiosity burned like a beacon. Richard stared at the table as if salvation might be hidden in the stitching. I walked toward the hallway slowly, letting the tension settle behind me. The soft carpet hushed my steps. The chandelier light followed my reflection as I moved. Inside the restroom, the noise of the dining room dissolved into quiet. I rested both hands on the marble counter and let myself breathe. The woman staring back at me in the mirror wasn't the broken girl who had watched her life collapse 10 years earlier. She wasn't the abandoned fiancé whose wedding dress never made it out of the garment bag. She wasn't the family embarrassment whispered about at every gathering. She was someone rebuilt, piece by piece, wound by wound, into something stronger than the people who tried to reduce her. But old bruises remember their shape. Sophia's words landed in familiar places, not because I believed them anymore, but because they were the last remnants of the version of myself she once controlled. I closed my eyes and inhaled. "You're not that girl. Not anymore." I reached into my purse and lifted the ring, the modest platinum band Daniel had placed on my finger 3 years earlier, in a quiet city hall ceremony with no audience to applaud or judge. I slid it onto my finger. It caught the light. Not loudly, not extravagantly, just truthfully. Then I straightened my dress, lifted my chin, and prepared to walk back into the room where Sophia believed she held the narrative. She had no idea the story was already shifting. She had no idea the man waiting outside wasn't a date. He was the CEO of a global acquisitions firm, the man who loved me, the man whose arrival would collapse the world she built on lies. And she had no idea this time. I wasn't the one about to break. As I stepped out of the restroom and paused in the quiet hallway, a familiar ache stirred. An echo from 10 years earlier, from the moment everything cracked open and the person I used to be fell straight through. Back then, I was 25, engaged, naive in the way only someone who believes love is unshakable can be. My life felt like it was aligning the way stories were supposed to unfold. Richard and I were 3 days away from our wedding. My dress hung inside the closet of the apartment we shared. My florist had just texted they'd finished the final arrangements. The honeymoon tickets to Santorini, paid for with my savings, sat tucked inside a leather folder on our coffee table. 3 days. That's all the time it took for everything to collapse. It started with a message from Richard. "We need to talk." A phrase that had always felt ominous suddenly became prophetic. When he arrived at the apartment, he wouldn't touch me. He wouldn't sit. He wouldn't even take off his coat. His eyes were wild, frantic, as if he'd seen something that had rewritten his understanding of the world. "I know," he whispered. "Know what?" I had asked, confused. He pulled out his phone, hands shaking, and showed me a string of texts. Messages supposedly from me, professing love to someone else. Calling off the wedding, admitting I'd been lying for months. Fake. All of it. Fabricated so precisely the timestamps matched moments I'd been asleep. I'd stared at him, stunned. Richard, that's not me. Someone made these. But he didn't listen. Or maybe he didn't want to. He whispered something about betrayal, about being blindsided, about trust shattering. And then he left. No explanation. No conversation. Just the sound of the door closing on a future I had already stepped into. I didn't know until weeks later who had crafted the lies. Sophia, my younger sister, the girl who used to borrow my clothes and steal my diary entries for fun, had taken my fiancé instead. And she did it with the kind of precision only someone who knows your vulnerabilities intimately could employ. She married him a few months later. I received the invitation by accident, a misdirected envelope addressed to the Millers. Inside was the invitation design I had picked for my own wedding 6 months earlier. The same venue, the same photographer, the same everything. Even my grandmother's necklace, the one meant for me, adorned her in the photos that flooded social media. Humiliation isn't always loud. Sometimes it is quiet and suffocating, pressing itself into the corners of your life until you can't take a breath without tasting it. For a long time, I lived in that air. People talked, whispered, invented their own narratives. Poor Daria, abandoned. Maybe she pushed him away. Maybe Sophia was the better match. Thank God the truth came out before the wedding. I tried to return to work, but even there the stigma lingered like smoke. If you can't manage your personal life, how can we trust you with major accounts? Someone actually said that to my face. Every door closed. Every chance evaporated. Every version of myself I had built crumbled under the weight of a betrayal I didn't commit. But rock bottom, unexpectedly, became bedrock. When you're stripped down to nothing, you learn what is actually yours. And what remained, for me, was grit. While Sophia honeymooned on the Santorini trip my savings paid for, I was taking temporary gigs, late-night jobs, contract work, anything that allowed me to collect skills and patterns of power I hadn't understood before. I borrowed $5,000, moved into a tiny studio in downtown Seattle, bought a used laptop and a folding card table that became my first desk. And I worked. I worked until the sun rose. I worked through weekends. I worked until silence felt like a companion, and exhaustion felt like a language I'd become fluent in. Strategic consulting had always fascinated me. The anatomy of decisions, the structure of influence, the way companies pivoted and transformed. But now it became something else. A lifeline. By year 2, I had 2 clients. By year 3, I had an office shared with 3 other startups. By year 4, I had employees. By year 5, Miller's strategic group had begun attracting the kind of competitors who once laughed at my resume. Some wounds don't fade, but they do fuel. During those years, Sophia didn't reach out. Not once. Her silence wasn't absence, it was performance. She wanted me erased. Life, however, had other plans. I met Daniel 6 years after the betrayal, 3 years before tonight. It happened in a boardroom high above downtown, where I was pitching a restructuring proposal to a company on the brink of disaster. I didn't know then that the quiet man in the corner was their incoming CEO, evaluating not just the company, but the people who dared tell him the truth. After the meeting, while the board murmured among themselves, he approached me with a question I didn't anticipate. "Do you always speak that directly?" he asked. "If the truth is expensive," I said, "it's still cheaper than denial." He smiled. Not the easy, charming kind, but one of recognition, as if something inside him clicked. 2 months later, Miller's strategic group began consulting for Orion Global Holdings. 6 months after that, Daniel asked me to marry him in a small coffee shop moments before we signed a contract worth millions. Our wedding at Seattle City Hall had no grand entrance, no curated guest list, no spectacle. Just two signatures, two witnesses, and two people choosing each other without needing permission or an audience. No one in my family knew. Not because I was hiding, but because I was finally building something without their interference. And now, standing in the hallway of the rosewood room, with my ring reflecting low chandelier light and the faint murmur of relatives beyond the door, I realized something simple. Tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. Everything Sophia built, her marriage, her image, her confidence, was rooted in a lie she told 10 years ago. Everything I built was rooted in truth. I fought for it every day since, and one of those foundations was about to collapse. I took a breath, smoothed my dress, and stepped back toward the dining room, toward the moment my past and present would collide in front of 40 witnesses who had forgotten the girl I used to be. They were about to meet the woman I became. I walked back toward the private dining room with measured steps, the soft carpet swallowing every sound. The platinum band on my finger felt like quiet armor, subtle, solid. A truth I no longer needed to hide. The closer I moved, the louder the voices inside became, blending into an uneasy hum of forced laughter, clinking glasses, and the sharp cadence of Sophia's chatter. Of course she was still performing. She never wasted an audience. When I stepped back into the room, heads turned instinctively. My mother's relief flickered across her face before she masked it. My father nodded gently, sensing something had shifted in me. Richard's shoulders tightened at the sight of my ring, small, unassuming, but unmistakably a wedding band. Sophia noticed it a beat later. "What's that?" she asked, voice catching just enough to betray her confusion. She squinted across the table. "Daria, what is that on your finger?" I lifted my water glass with my left hand, letting the ring catch the chandelier's light. Soft, deliberate, unavoidable. "Oh," I said mildly. "This?" Every inch of Sophia leaned forward like a predator scenting something foreign, something she didn't recognize, didn't control. Before she could speak again, the door to the rosewood room opened. A hush fell so suddenly it stole the air from the table. The servers froze. My mother's hand slipped from her wine glass. Richard's jaw tightened until his teeth clicked. And then Daniel stepped inside. Tall, composed, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that cut clean lines across the room. His presence didn't shout. It shifted the air, the way a tide shifts when the moon pulls. His eyes scanned the table, searching. Then he saw me. He softened in a way only someone deeply certain of his place does. "Sorry to interrupt," he said in his calm, steady voice. "I'm looking for my wife." The silence cracked open. Sophia's eyes went comically wide. My mother gasped into her hand. Several cousins nearly dropped their forks. Richard's face drained of color so fast it was almost frightening. "Wife?" Sophia echoed, choking on the word as if it were foreign. Your what?" I stood slowly, walking toward him. He met me halfway, resting a gentle kiss against my temple. A gesture simple enough, yet devastating in its truth. Everyone at the table saw it. Everyone understood. I slipped my arm through his with quiet familiarity. "This is Daniel," I said softly. "My husband." Daniel smiled at the room, polite but unyielding. 3 years next month." The whispering began instantly, a frantic rustle of disbelief, speculation, and shock. Relatives leaned into one another, their confusion turning the air electric. My mother pressed a hand to her chest. "Daria, why didn't you tell us?" "Privacy," I said. After everything that happened, it felt right to build something without an audience. Sophia recovered enough to force a brittle smile. "Well, How surprising. Her voice cracked, a thin fracture splitting through her performance. And what do you do, Daniel? Teacher? Social worker? Something noble, but not exactly. I work in acquisitions, he answered gently. Oh, she said, tone patronizing. Like real estate? Behind her, Richard's eyes widened, not in curiosity, but recognition. Dangerous recognition. Daniel shook his head. Corporate acquisitions, Orion Global Holdings. That name, the one carrying weight across industries, hung in the air like a bell tolling. Sophia blinked. Orion. What? But Richard knew. He knew instantly. His chair scraped violently against the floor as he stood, panic twisting every line of his face. You're... He swallowed hard. You're Daniel Chen. Daniel inclined his head. Guilty. A wave of whispers surged across the room. Cousins stared. Uncles exchanged glances. My mother looked from Daniel to me, struggling to connect the pieces. Daniel slipped one hand gently to the small of my back. But honestly, he said, eyes warm on mine, being Daria's husband is the part I'm most proud of. Sophia stared at him, a brittle smile frozen on lips that no longer knew how to shape control. But Orion Global, that's the company sniffing around Pinnacle, isn't it? She turned to Richard, voice lifting. Didn't you say they were being aggressive with their offer? Richard looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Yes, he whispered. They moved up the timeline. Their CEO is coming in person, you said, she continued, still clinging to the pieces of a narrative quickly slipping away from her. Richard closed his eyes. Daniel gave a polite smile. He already did. The room froze. Sophia stared at me, confusion morphing into horror. Wait, Daria? You married the man who bought my husband's company? Yes, I said. Though that's not why I married him. Her face drained white. You knew about this? You planned? No. My voice was steady. Your husband's decisions planned this. Daniel glanced toward the door. My legal team should be here soon, he said conversationally. We found some concerning discrepancies at Pinnacle. Richard's knees buckled. He gripped the back of his chair, knuckles whitening. My father looked at him, bewildered. Richard, what is he talking about? Daniel continued, calm as rain. Non-compliance issues, misallocated funds, personal expenses run through corporate accounts, transfers to a shell entity in the Caymans. He paused. $2 million worth, give or take. The dining room erupted in gasps. My mother covered her mouth. Cousins whispered frantically. Sophia's wineglass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Richard choked on his breath. Daria, this is revenge. I stepped forward just enough for him to see the truth in my face. No, Richard, I said quietly. This is accountability. Sophia staggered backward, gripping the table. Her voice came out a trembling whisper. You married the man who could destroy us. I held her gaze. I married the man who rebuilt me. The room hadn't yet recovered from Daniel's words when the doors opened again. 2 attorneys in tailored charcoal suits stepped inside, each carrying a slim black briefcase. Their presence sliced through the atmosphere like a cold blade. Conversations died instantly. Even the servers at the back froze mid-step. Mr. Chen, one of the attorneys said with a respectful nod, we're ready. Sophia looked from them to Daniel as if trying to decipher an unfamiliar language. Why are there lawyers here? This is a family dinner. That's precisely why we'll keep this brief, Daniel replied, voice steady, polite, almost gentle, yet leaving no air for negotiation. Richard sank back into his chair, spine folding in on itself. His hand trembled as he reached for his water glass. He didn't drink. He couldn't. His eyes flicked between the attorneys and Daniel with dawning horror. My father frowned. Richard, what's going on? The lead attorney, Mr. Morrison, a quiet man with perfectly measured expressions, placed a folder on the table in front of Richard. This is your official termination notice from Pinnacle Development, he said, effective immediately. Sophia let out a strangled noise, half disbelief, half feral. Terminated? You can't fire him at a dinner. He hasn't done anything. The attorney did not flinch. Mrs. Hayes, this decision is based on documented violations uncovered during Orion Global's acquisition of Pinnacle. Nay, there it was. Said plainly, no room left for Sophia to spin or charm or deny. We haven't agreed to any acquisition, she snapped. Daniel's voice remained calm. The acquisition was finalized this afternoon. Orion Global Holdings now owns Pinnacle Development. The shock hit the entire table like a physical force, 40 bodies jerking back, 40 eyes widening at once. Sophia stared at Daniel, blinking rapidly as if her mind were refusing to process the information. You bought his company? Without... Your husband's board approved it, Daniel replied. Given Pinnacle's vulnerabilities, it was their only logical move. Richard's breath came short and shallow. He looked at Daniel, then at me, then back to the folder as if hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less damning. My mother whispered, "Oh my God!" Sophia rounded on Richard. Why didn't you tell me? He didn't answer. Maybe he couldn't. The attorney opened the folder and slid several documents across the table. Mr. Hayes, he said evenly, our forensic review found multiple financial irregularities tied directly to you. He tapped the first page. Unauthorized transfers, off-book expenses, personal purchases claimed as corporate activity, and the $2 million in diverted funds routed to a shell account registered in the Cayman Islands. The last line fell hard, like a punch to the room's lungs. 2 million, Aunt Valerie whispered, hand flying to her mouth. Sophia recoiled as if the words themselves slapped her. That's a lie, she hissed. Richard would never... But Richard's expression said everything. Guilt doesn't need dialogue. He swallowed hard. Sophia, No. She shook her head violently. This is her. This is Daria. She planned this. She wants to ruin us because she's jealous. Jealous of what? I asked softly. Sophia froze, caught off guard by how little heat my voice carried. Of the life Richard and I built, she spat. Daniel's attorney interjected, tone clinical. Mrs. Hayes, based on our findings, your husband has been violating Pinnacle's financial protocols for at least 18 months, possibly longer. The second attorney added, had Orion not proceeded with the acquisition, Pinnacle would have faced regulatory investigation. Your situation could be considerably worse. Sophia looked around the table wildly, hoping someone would rescue her narrative. No one moved. Even the relatives who normally championed her couldn't find footing. My father leaned forward, voice low but sharp. Richard, is this true? Richard sagged, the facade finally collapsing. I made some mistakes. Mistakes? The attorney echoed. Mr. Hayes, deliberately funneling corporate funds into private accounts is embezzlement. Sophia's breath hitched. Embezzlement? No. He couldn't. Daniel folded his hands behind his back. We're choosing not to pursue criminal charges, provided Richard cooperates fully with the transition. And if he doesn't? My father asked. Then the matter moves to federal authorities, the attorney replied smoothly, and the outcome becomes far less favorable. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Richard rose unsteadily, bracing himself on the chair. Daria, please. This looks like what it is, I said, meeting his gaze. Your actions, your choices, not mine. He flinched. Sophia's eyes brimmed with disbelief as she pointed a shaking finger at me. You wanted this. You've been waiting 10 years to destroy us. I stepped closer, just enough for her to feel the weight of the truth. If I wanted revenge, I said quietly, I had opportunities years ago. I had access. I had knowledge. I had power. But I didn't use any of it. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. Then why him? She yelled. Why marry the one man who could ruin our life? Daniel's reply was soft, but devastating. Because her life does not revolve around you. Sophia staggered back like the words struck her physically. My mother looked between us, heartbreak in her eyes, not for me, but for the years she had believed the wrong story. The attorneys began gathering their papers. Mr. Hayes, Mr. Morrison said, you have 24 hours to clear your office. The company car, corporate accounts, and membership privileges are revoked effective immediately. Richard nodded weakly. There was no fight left in him. Sophia swayed, gripping the back of a chair with white-knuckled desperation. Our house, she whispered. The mortgage is through the company. Then you should begin packing, the attorney said. Her knees nearly gave out. For the first time since I'd known her, Sophia was speechless. Not because she had run out of things to say, but because reality had finally outrun her imagination. And it was just beginning. Richard's breathing grew uneven, the rise and fall of his chest sharp enough to be heard in the stunned silence of the rosewood room. His hands trembled against the edge of the table, gripping the wood as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. Richard, my father said quietly, if there's something else we need to know, say it now. Sophia turned to him with desperate fury. Don't you dare. Don't you dare make this worse. But guilt has a weight. One that eventually crushes whatever scaffolding denial tries to build. Richard's shoulders collapsed. I didn't leave Daria because she cheated, he blurted, voice cracking down the middle. I left because Sophia told me she had proof. My throat tightened. Not with pain, but with the cold familiarity of hearing a truth you've always known confirmed out loud. What proof? My mother whispered. Richard swallowed hard, unable to look at me. She showed me messages, texts. Said Daria had been seeing someone else. That she was ending the wedding. I believed her. The room inhaled sharply. Sophia froze, and something inside her, something carefully manufactured over a decade, fractured. That's not true, she said quickly, too quickly. He's twisting. He's lying. Richard's voice broke. You made the screenshots, Sophia. You told me she was making a fool of me. You said it was better to leave first than be humiliated. He looked at me then, eyes hollow. I knew. I knew they weren't real. Not completely. But I needed the money from your trust fund to save Pinnacle. And you, he swallowed. You were the safe option to sacrifice. Safe to sacrifice. The words slid through the room like ice water. My father stood halfway out of his chair. My mother covered her face. A cousin gasped softly. Sophia's facade collapsed entirely. You were supposed to love me, she shot back at Richard, voice rising into a wild pitch. You said you loved me. I loved the idea of stability, Richard said. You offered it. Daria deserved better. The admission hit Sophia like a blow to the ribs. She staggered backward. No, I didn't want this. I just wanted something that was mine. She always got everything. Mom loved her more. Dad trusted her more. Everyone respected her more. I wanted one thing. So you took everything, I replied softly. Not because you loved it, because you couldn't stand that it belonged to me. Sophia shook her head violently. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't know the company would. This isn't fair. Fair. A decade of silence, humiliation, rebuilding from ashes. And she spoke of fairness. She looked straight at me, mascara streaking in wet black lines. "You have everything now," she whispered. "Your company, your power, your husband." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Isn't that enough? Why destroy Richard?" "I didn't destroy Richard," I said, meeting her gaze without flinching. "Richard destroyed himself." "No, you want this," she spat, trembling. "You want to see me lose everything." I took a slow breath. It was time. "Sophia," I said quietly, "I let go of wanting anything from you a long time ago. Tonight isn't about revenge. It's about facing the truth you ran from." She shook her head, palms pressed to her temples. "You don't understand. If we lose everything, I won't survive this. I can't." Her voice broke into a choked whisper. "I'm pregnant." Gasps rippled through the room. Even the attorneys glanced up. Richard's head snapped toward her. "What? Sophia, why didn't you—" "8 weeks," she whispered. "I was going to announce it tonight. That's why I wanted this dinner. I thought the family would celebrate with us." Tears fell fast down her cheeks now, raw, unfiltered panic carving through her carefully built composure. My mother stood on trembling legs. "Oh, sweetheart." But Sophia stepped back from her touch as if burned. "You all think I'm a monster," she cried. "But I was just trying to hold my life together. Richard said he'd fix things at Pinnacle. He said Orion would never look too close." Daniel's voice remained calm. "We look closely at everything." She exhaled a broken laugh. "Of course you do." Her gaze drifted to me again, pleading now, stripped of ego, stripped of pretense. "Daria, help us. Please. Don't let this happen. Not now." There it was. The old reflex inside me, the one conditioned to soothe, to fix, to make peace, shifted. But it didn't rise. It didn't move. It simply observed. I stepped closer, my voice low, steady. "Sophia, I'm sorry you're scared, and I'm sorry for what this means for your child. But fear doesn't erase what you did. It doesn't rewrite the past. It doesn't undo the lies." She shook her head desperately. "So that's it? You're cutting us off?" "I'm setting boundaries," I corrected gently. "Because forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, and it doesn't mean I become your safety net." The room held its breath. "You made choices," I continued, "and now you face their consequences. That isn't cruelty. That's adulthood." Sophia whispered, "But I don't know how to start over." "You'll learn," I said softly. "The way I did." She stared at me, broken, mascara streaking down her face, one hand protectively covering her abdomen. In that moment, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindication. I felt clarity. For the first time in years, the past loosened its grip. For the first time, I could see my life without being shaped by hers. Behind me, Daniel stepped forward, resting his hand lightly at my back. Solid, steady, a quiet reminder of the world I had rebuilt. "Mr. Hayes," the lead attorney said, reclaiming the room, "we will proceed with the transition terms. The longer we delay, the more complicated this becomes." Richard nodded numbly. Sophia didn't move. And in the stillness, I understood. This wasn't just the collapse of their image. It was the collapse of the story she'd forced me into for 10 years. And tonight, I finally stepped out of it. The attorneys began gathering their documents, the quiet click of briefcases punctuating the thick silence. But there was still something that needed to be said, something that, for 10 years, had hovered unspoken above every family gathering, every sideways glance, every carefully crafted narrative my sister had spun. I stepped forward, Before we move to the transition terms, I said, my voice steady enough to draw every gaze in the room. There's something else you all deserve to understand. The relatives, 40 people who had watched me shrink under gossip for a decade, turned toward me as if sensing a shift they weren't prepared for. I looked at Richard first. You'll receive the full transition package tomorrow. I've assigned my best team at Miller Strategic Group to oversee the handover. His brows pinched. You'll be involved? I'll be overseeing the employee retention plan, I clarified. Because your staff, your developers, your analysts, the people who showed up every morning and did their jobs, don't deserve to lose their livelihood because of your mistakes. A wave of murmurs swept the table. You're protecting them? He asked, disbelief knotting his voice. They didn't betray anyone, I replied. They just worked. My father exhaled softly, a sound of recognition rather than surprise. My mother blinked rapidly, as if the version of me she'd carried for years didn't match the one now standing in front of her. Sophia, still gripping the back of a chair, stared at me like she didn't understand the language being spoken. I turned to the room. For years, people whispered about what happened between us, I said. Some of you pitied me, some judged me, some stayed silent because it was easier than asking questions. Cousin Valerie dropped her gaze. Uncle Pete shifted uncomfortably. Others stared with the stunned stillness of people watching a curtain lift on a scene they'd always misinterpreted. But here's what you never saw, I continued. Sophia didn't just take Richard. She took my entire wedding, the venue I booked, the photographer I paid the deposit for, even the necklace Grandma willed to me. Gasps, audible ones. My mother stiffened. Sophia, she whispered, you told me Daria wanted you to wear it for tradition. Sophia closed her eyes as if bracing for impact. It wasn't. I didn't. I kept going. Not with rage, with clarity. She used my design for the cake. She used the same florist, the same seating chart style, even the same vows I drafted in my journal. She didn't just take a fiancé. She took a narrative, and she let all of you believe I was the reason. The silence sharpened. And, while she built her life with stolen pieces of mine, I said, I spent years rebuilding quietly, from the ground up. You didn't see the nights I slept in my office. You didn't see the meetings where investors dismissed me because of rumors. You didn't see how many doors closed. Not because I failed, but because a lie was more convenient than the truth. My mother's eyes glistened, not with pity, but with dawning guilt. I didn't know, she whispered. Daria, I didn't know. You didn't ask, I said softly. None of you did. The words weren't an accusation, they were a mirror. My father cleared his throat, voice gravelly. Sophia, is this true? All of it? She hesitated just long enough for the truth to land. I didn't think it mattered, she whispered, her voice paper thin. Daria always bounced back. She always had everything under control. I thought she could survive it. That wasn't your choice to make, my father said. And for the first time in my life, his voice held steel directed at her, not me. My mother turned to me, eyes wide with a kind of grief that comes from realizing you failed the child who never asked for anything. I should have protected you, she said quietly. I didn't respond. Some wounds don't need verbal stitching. They need air, time, and accountability. Sophia's breath hitched. I was jealous, okay? Mom compared me to you my whole life. Dad praised you. Teachers loved you. I was always the one who needed help, the one who wasn't enough. And I thought, if I could have something you wanted, just one thing, I wouldn't feel so small. And did it work? I asked. Her silence answered for her. I continued, my voice low but unwavering. You didn't rise by taking from me, Sophia. You just sank, carrying what was never yours. Sophia flinched. Not dramatically, subtly, as if realizing, maybe for the first time, how much of her life had been built on a fault line. I looked around the table again. Tonight isn't just about a corporate collapse, I said. It's about 10 years of silence, 10 years of enabling cruelty, 10 years of letting a lie become more comfortable than the truth. I stepped back beside Daniel, who watched with the quiet steadiness of someone who had witnessed every layer of my rebuilding. This family has operated under one rule for too long, I finished. Keep the peace, don't rock the boat, pretend everything's fine. My father lowered his gaze. My mother's chin trembled. That ends tonight. Sophia swayed slightly, her hand pressing again to her abdomen, fear and exhaustion pulling at her posture. She wasn't fighting anymore. She wasn't performing. She wasn't even defending. She was unraveling. My voice softened. Not for her, but for myself. I don't need revenge, I said. I don't need validation. I don't need any of you to rewrite the past. I just need the truth to stop bending every time Sophia speaks. The room remained still, suspended in the aftermath of something long overdue. Daniel glanced toward the attorneys. We'll move forward. But before we did, I added one last thing. This isn't cruelty, I said. This is closure. And for the first time in 10 years, the room didn't see me as the girl who was left behind. They saw me as the woman who finally stepped into her own story. The attorneys began closing their briefcases. Conversations, if they could even be called that, became faint, disjointed fragments floating in the stunned quiet of the rosewood room. 40 relatives sat suspended between everything they thought they knew and everything that had just been revealed. But there was still one final truth I needed to speak. I stepped forward again, letting the silence settle around me. Daniel stood just behind my shoulder, steady and unobtrusive, as if offering strength without ever needing to be asked. For 10 years, I said softly, our family has lived by a rule that has done more damage than anything Sophia or Richard ever did. The room stilled, waiting. Don't rock the boat. Keep the peace. Pretend everything is fine. The words seemed to echo across the crystal glasses and polished tableware, bouncing off faces that suddenly looked older, smaller, and deeply uncomfortable. I continued. But silence in the face of cruelty is complicity. And for 10 years, that silence allowed lies to become the version of reality everyone accepted because it was easier. Nobody dared look away now. I let my gaze sweep across the table, at the aunts who'd whispered, the cousins who'd speculated, the relatives who never once asked me what really happened. But I'm not carrying that version of family anymore, I said. Not for Sophia, not for Richard, not for anyone. The words didn't tremble. They didn't burn. They simply landed. Solid, definitive, freeing. My father inhaled sharply, as if bracing for a verdict. I'll have relationships, I continued, with the people in this family who are willing to acknowledge the truth and commit to being better. The rest of you. I paused, letting the weight settle. Can keep your comfortable silence. I want no part of it. A few relatives lowered their eyes. Others looked stunned, as if the image of me they'd held onto had just dissolved. Sophia stared at me from across the table, mascara smeared, posture hunched, one hand still resting protectively over the slight swell of her stomach. There was no fire left in her expression tonight. Only exhaustion and the kind of fear that comes from realizing the world won't cushion you anymore. She whispered my name. Daria. Will you ever forgive us? The question didn't slice. It didn't sting. It didn't even surprise me. I took in a slow breath. I already have, I said gently. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It means I'm not carrying your burden anymore. Silence unfurled across the table like a long sigh. Behind me, Daniel stepped forward slightly, just enough to show he stood with me, not in front of me. The quiet strength in that gesture meant more than any grand declaration. Mr. Morrison, the lead attorney, cleared his throat. Mr. Hayes, you'll report to the transition officer on Monday morning. If you cooperate fully, Orion will not pursue criminal charges. Richard nodded numbly. He was no longer the man who once left me 3 days before our wedding. He wasn't even the shell of him. He looked emptied. My father spoke then, only the second time he'd raised his voice all evening. Richard, Sophia, you owe Daria an apology, a real one. Sophia's lips parted but no sound came. The apology hovered somewhere behind her expression, still trapped behind pride, fear, denial, whatever had ruled her for so long. Don't, I said quietly, before she could force the words out. Not now. Not like this. She met my gaze, and something almost like relief swept across her face. For once, she understood. Apologies spoken in desperation aren't apologies. They're escape routes. When you're ready to apologize because you understand what you did, I said, not because you got caught, you'll know where to find me. She nodded faintly, and for the first time in our adult lives, she didn't fight the boundary I set. Daniel glanced at me then, as if asking silently, "Are you ready?" And I was. I reached for my coat, the same one I'd worn in countless late-night strategy meetings, the same one I'd worn the night Daniel first asked me if I believed in rebuilding. As we turned toward the door, the room behind us remained still. No one reached out to stop me. No one tried to drag me back into the old orbit I'd inhabited for so long. They simply watched, finally understanding something they should have seen years ago. I wasn't leaving in anger. I was leaving in liberation. Daniel opened the door for me, a small gesture layered with meaning. As I stepped out into the quiet hallway, the chandelier light softened behind us, dimming like the curtain falling on a long, exhausting act. The hallway felt cooler, wider, freer. Daniel intertwined his fingers with mine. "You did exactly what you came here to do," he said softly. "I didn't come for revenge," I murmured. "No," he agreed. "You came for closure, and you got it." We walked through the lobby and out into the crisp Seattle night. The city lights shimmered along the pavement, reflected in passing cars, alive with a kind of movement that felt like possibility rather than noise. For the first time in 10 years, my past didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a completed chapter. As Daniel opened the car door, he paused, leaning in slightly. "Ready to go home?" I smiled. Genuine, quiet, unburdened. "Yes," I said. "Finally, yes." We drove away from the Rosewood Room, its golden windows fading behind us, leaving only the soft hum of the city and the warmth of Daniel's hand in mine. And I knew, truly knew, that I had stepped into a life built not from what was taken from me, but from everything I had built for myself. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed by someone you love, or forced to rebuild from nothing, tell me, would you have revealed the truth sooner, or waited like I did? Share your thoughts below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming someone they never believed you could be.